Good morning. This is Steve Hoffaker. Welcome to another of our episodes in our professional development series. Today, we are pleased to have a gerontologist present their take on aging in place. Patty Wahlgren from Omaha has been a participant in our webinar series for many sessions. Today, she's on the other side of the camera, and she's going to be leading us now. In upcoming sessions, again, about every 5 weeks or so, and just check my calendar on the website. I don't have the next one or the ones after that. I've got several that are tentative, but rather than announce and then have to change, just keep an eye out. We've got some really interesting programs coming up, as well as we have in the past. So let me go ahead and turn this over to Patty. She'll introduce herself and go from there. And as I say, this is being recorded, and you'll all get a link to the recording later this afternoon. Patty, take it away.
Hey, thank you all for being here this morning, or if you're watching the recorded version, for taking the time to watch it later. As Steve mentioned, I am a frequent attendee of these webinars because I always leave with some new helpful information, and hopefully I can do the same for you today. A quick note, if you see me looking down at my notes, it's not because I don't know the material I'm presenting. I simply want to make sure that I cover all the material I have for you in our allotted time, while I allow for some questions at the end. So during the CAPS courses that Steve taught, it always seemed to me that I was looking at the material a little bit differently than the other classmates. And I will add that I took the classes in person because this was well before the pandemic. Due to the variety of background of the students, this isn't terribly surprising, but I think I was always the only one that was coming with the gerontology perspective. So to back up one step further, my background prior to gerontology is in architecture, specializing in senior housing. I went into gerontology with the intention of expanding my knowledge base to improve my ability to design senior housing. What my experience in graduate school showed me was that older adults overwhelmingly want to age in place. Senior housing was covered very little, if at all. And so our focus there was more on the biology and psychology aspects of aging. And so that is how I tend to look at aging in place. My focus as a gerontologist is on environmental gerontology, or where older adults live. Although I'm a proponent of aging in place, I'm not anti-senior housing. I would prefer that older adults simply be informed and know that they have a variety of options and what those options entail. I've taught courses on senior housing, also on aging in place. And when I teach aging in place courses, home modifications is only part of the course that I'm teaching. I use a much broader lens when I approach the topic, and that is what I want to share a little bit with you today. So the first thing I would look at is who is aging in place, to know the demographic that I, am possibly working with here. There are, outside of the typical people aging in place that you can think of, there are a growing number of solo agers. These are referring to people who have never married and have no kids. This is still a relatively small percentage of older adults, but the trends are suggesting that this group will continue to grow. Solo agers have a unique aging in place set of challenges because they're not as likely to have a built-in support system. But on the other hand, they have always been independent, and they're likely used to handling everything themselves, which can be a benefit. Along with who's aging in place comes this financial component. There have been headlines about the increasing amount of wealth held by older adults in America. It's a bit misleading. Part of this is due to the fact that there are simply more older adults to begin with because people are living longer. And home equity often is a significant part of net worth for many of those individuals. However, it is true that spending declines among older adults regardless of economic status. And a recent analysis showed that approximately 80% of older adults are struggling financially, which is a bit alarming because that's a large chunk of that population. There was an article circulating recently, and many of you may have seen it, titled, "Can You Afford to Age in Place?" I found the title a bit ironic because if you can't afford to age in place, you likely can't afford senior housing without impoverishing yourself. Aging in place gives people the financial control over where they spend their money, whether it's on caregiving or home modifications, things like that. But at the end of the day, if an older adult is trying to determine whether or not they can even afford their medications, home modifications aren't even going to be a consideration for them. So we need to be able to find solutions for aging in place for that growing low income or lower income portion of the adult population. Beyond who, then we start looking at where to age in place. People typically assume that aging in place means remaining in the same home, and for many that is the case. My mom is the perfect example of this. She's been in her own home for 60 years. Okay. Some build a new home specifically as their forever home because remaining in community in the same community that you've been in can be an important part of aging in place, even if you don't stay in the exact same home. However, obviously there are a number of older adults who do relocate, often to be near relatives, usually adult children, and they still remain in a single family home. One of my mom's friends who's 90 moved from Nebraska to Oregon to be near her daughter, but is still in a single family home. She's not in senior housing. I've also had students in my classes who intended to age in place in an apartment because they wanted to maintain their independence, but they didn't want all the responsibilities that come with owning a home. And although it's not as common, aging in place can also occur in middle housing, like townhouses, fourplexes, things like that. Here in Nebraska, due to our zoning restrictions, other options like ADUs and frankly, a lot of middle housing typically isn't found a whole lot, and we are working on that, but that's in progress, so to speak. Another option is shared housing, which is growing in popularity. There are a number of websites out there where older adults can post that they have a room in their house that they'd like to rent, and conversely, older adults can look for a room to rent. This situation provides the added benefit of not only the financial aspect for both the renter and the rentee, but also that support aspect of not having to live alone while allowing both parties to maintain their independence. Weather can be a factor in location choice, obviously, with older adults stereotypically moving to warmer climates, like Florida, maybe to be near Steve. That tends to be what people think of when they think of older adults relocating, but trends are showing that the location of where older adults are aging in place is actually trending more toward where it's affordable over climate. Aging in place in a location like Nebraska that has winter is going to have different considerations and challenges. For those, since this is the area I'm the most familiar with, for those who do remain in Nebraska, we have what's called the I-80 migration for older adults. And what that refers to is people, as they get older, moving from the smaller towns to those larger communities along the interstate so that they're closer to more services and have more options available to them. Where to age in place also involves the issue of whether or not to downsize. Okay, it seems that often downsizing is recommended for aging in place, and I don't generally tend to agree with this position. Each situation is unique, and has to be handled individually. But I think a lot of home modifications are more easily accomplished in a larger home where you have more space to work with. Okay, this is an example of a bathroom that would be great for aging in place, but that would be very hard to accomplish if you've downsized to a smaller home. The focus on where to age in place should actually be on right sizing. Being in a home that's the right size for what they need, what they can afford, manage, all those kinds of things. For some people, a home with 2 master suites might be a great way for a couple to age in place. That's not necessarily going to involve downsizing. It might even involve getting a little bit bigger home to make sure that their needs are met. Multi-level versus ranch home is another main consideration. Okay, stairs obviously present a challenge when we're aging, but interestingly enough, I have had students in my classes insist that they will not be leaving their multi-level home because they view the stairs as an easy way to get exercise and to help them maintain their mobility. Okay, I also think this decision has a lot to do with the housing that's available where you live. If you're wanting to stay in the same area, here in Omaha, we have a lot of multi-level housing, which may surprise some people because you think of Nebraska as being very flat, but a lot of it is split level, tri-level, 2-story, and even a lot of the ranch style homes that we have are raised ranches. So you'd still be dealing with stairs. If you go to look to purchase a ranch style home, what that means is there's either probably not going to be a whole lot of options available to you, or what is available is going to be expensive because it's limited in supply. So for many, adding a stair lift or even adding multiple stair lifts to the home they're currently in becomes a more cost-effective option. And then it also provides that additional benefit of allowing them to stay in the same home and not having to relocate at all. Depending on your location, that obviously may not be the case. Location can also influence the preference for a multi-level home. Here in Nebraska, we have tornadoes, okay? And the safest place to be during that type of severe weather is in a basement. And while there are jokes about us going outside to look for tornadoes as soon as the sirens go off, and yes, some people do that, anyone who's actually been through or tornado likely cannot imagine living in a home that doesn't have a basement. Okay, so in our area, virtually all homes have basements, which means there will be stairs to deal with. The concern for the area that you're working with or focused on might not be tornadoes, but regardless of that, be sure to take emergency planning, like those kinds of things, into consideration when you're looking at helping someone age in place. So after looking at who and where, then we look at why. Why are people aging in place? And this is where the gerontologist side of me really kicks into high gear. Outside of the obvious answer that it's what people prefer, there are a number of theories of aging that are going to connect with what we do as aging in place specialists. One of those theories explains that our connection to our environment increases as we age. Younger adults are more likely to move, relocate, be a little more nomadic, if you will. Older adults are more likely to put down roots and stay close to where they are currently. This theory explains why people prefer to age in place. Senior housing is often designed using a hospitality model, which means they're designed somewhat similar to hotels. Okay, these facilities or communities can be incredibly nice, but psychologically, the perception of this hospitality model is going to register as temporary for an older adult. we associate hotels with a short-term stay. Okay. They don't create that connection of home. And because of that, it doesn't convey the sense of permanence that we want from our home. This is why some senior housing facilities have actually gone to a more residential style with a very limited number of residents. Greenhouse facilities are one such example of that. The general concept here is that they're trying to make it as much like aging in place as they possibly can. Living in a congregate setting with a large number of people simply isn't going to be able to create that impression of home for many. Another theory is that our capacity to adapt decreases as we age due to functional limitations. Makes sense, right? Cognitive decline is not a normal part of aging, but physical decline is. A lot of the focus as an aging in place specialist is dealing with those functional limitations and focusing on that. As a gerontologist, these functional limitations bring up the concept of risk tolerance. Okay, what level of risk is acceptable? Too often, older adults end up in senior housing because someone else decided it wasn't safe for them to be in their own home. Consider the risk tolerance of the older adults you work with. Okay, where are they on this scale? I guarantee you they are aware of their functional limitations, okay, but they may be all right with taking a higher level of risk than others think is acceptable. A lot of the time, this risk is associated with falling, and falling is a valid concern, but keep in mind that the only way we can truly keep someone from falling is to either keep them seated or keep them in bed. And that really should not be our goal here. I've worked in senior housing. People fall frequently there as well. Okay, falling is not an issue that's isolated to aging in place or something that only needs to be solved for there. So make sure you understand what level of risk they are is acceptable to them. Another theory of aging in place is social emotional selectivity theory. And it sounds fancy, but it just means that as we age, we become increasingly selective to maximize positive experiences. Okay, this is where we get the idea or the concept of quality of life versus quantity of life, or health span versus lifespan. Okay, life expectancy is currently around 76 years of age after being at a high of 79 back in 2019, compared to the average health span, which is closer to 66 years of age as of 2019. For some older adults, remaining in their home is a way of maximizing that positive experience, even if it doesn't maximize their lifespan. Okay? We might be willing to have fewer social interactions as long as they're ones we'll enjoy, as opposed to a congregate living experience where the social interactions are going to be many, but they're not necessarily all positive. The best example of this theory that I can give you is my own mom. She's 87 years old and she's aging in place. She retired at age 84 because she enjoyed working. Her house isn't necessarily in the condition I would like it to be in, but she has told me, I don't know how many more years I have left, and I'm not going to spend them cleaning. She is focused on maximizing those positive experiences. Okay, so instead, she goes out to breakfast with her friends. She goes shopping. She lives in a different city than me, so she comes to visit her grandkids, things like that. Okay, she is living the social emotional selectivity theory because she is doing what she wants to make herself happy. She's focused on quality of life and assuming and hoping that will connect to a larger quantity of life for her as well. The next theory I'll touch on, and again, big name, but not that complicated, selective optimization with compensation theory. This theory connects directly to CAPS because it addresses how we maintain functioning with age-related decline. So how do we keep doing things even though we're not able to do everything the way we always used to be able to do? There are several examples of this with aging in place. One would be when an older adult stops driving and finds alternate means of transportation. Okay, they optimize what they can do, compensate by letting someone else provide the transportation for them. Another is when they use furniture to stabilize themselves as they navigate their way through their home. They're compensating for less mobility by using their furniture. Remaining in a familiar environment allows them to compensate more easily for age-related decline because they have a mental map of that space that they can help rely on to be able to do that. And the last theory I'll touch on is motivational theory. This is simply where older adults focus on things where they can maintain control. Aging in place is a large part of this, and this probably is true for all adults as they age in place or age, that they experience some motivational theory because they want to maintain control over their life. No one wants to give up control. So when we're looking at the why of aging in place, there are three basic aspects to focus on then. Independence, doing it yourself, agency, being able to maintain control, and autonomy, freedom from being controlled. Ideally, aging in place involves all three of these. Okay, not just helping them stay independent, but also helping maintain that sense of control that they are in charge. So now we've touched on who, where, and why for aging in place. Let's look at how to age in place. As a gerontologist, I look at aging in place as having three basic pillars: health, support, and money. It's going to take some combination of all three of these in order to age in place. Less of one pillar means we need more of the other two. Okay, so if your health isn't as good, you're going to need more support. You'll also likely need more money to provide for the care or cover cost of care. If you don't have much support, you're going to need your health to be better, or you're going to need more money so that you can obtain the support that you need. If you don't have much money, you need your health to be good, or you're going to need a lot of support. Within this model, when we're looking at it as CAPS, home modifications are a form of support. So they would be in that middle pillar. Being located in Omaha, my local aging in place example is Warren Buffett. Okay, Warren still lives in the home he purchased back in 1958, so he's been there for 65 years. He's 92, almost 93 this summer. Warren is in the unique position that, as I'm sure you're well aware, he has more money than the average person. And so that means that his money pillar is actually so big, it can support the other two. Most older adults obviously are not in that position. So when we're helping older adults figure out how to age in place, the psychology aspect becomes exceedingly important. Okay, we need to meet older adults where they're at. I mentioned that my mom is 87 and aging in place, and I will use her a lot as examples in here, and she knows that I talk about her and she's fine with it. She knows what I do, obviously. I've made numerous recommendations to her on how best to age in place. Some of those recommendations she openly accepts, loves it. Others she outright rejects and tells me no. To several of them, she has actually responded, "I'm not ready for that yet, maybe when I'm older." So she's already 87. She has had relatives live past 100, so it's not unreasonable to assume that she's got a number of good years left. And fortunately, she is in fairly good health. But this does mean that I have to recognize that perspective and respond accordingly to her. Okay. I can know what I think is the best option for her. And if she's not ready for it, it does me no good to push it. In fact, she'll just push back harder. It is in some respects like when you've dealt with a child and think, no, I'm the parent, I know what's best for you. If they don't want to listen, they're not going to listen. Okay. Working with an older adult in a similar situation, a strategy to employ is to suggest less permanent options that allow for a trial and adjustment period. Examples of this might be using an assist bar that attaches to a bathtub as opposed to wall-mounted grab bars. Okay, it gets them used to using some assistance, but we haven't made any permanent changes to the home. So if they decide they really can't stand it or don't like it, it can be changed. Using a security pole, tension mounted, that would be another example for this. For my mom's house, instead of a costly renovation to make the entry stepless, we added a step. And this is a picture of the exact one we got. It's just like one you use for step aerobics. We took the bottom black piece off to make it the right height. So we were able to adjust it. It gives her an intermediate step as she's going up the porch into her home. And she is totally fine with it for now. It's made things easier for her. As her mobility changes, and it's likely to do that, we're going to have to make additional adjustments. But for now, this is the compromise that she's willing to deal with and accept. Okay. As CAPS, you may recognize that these are not the ideal options that we would theoretically want an older adult to do. Okay. But having a good, better, best type of strategy for your recommendations is going to allow older adults to feel like they still have some control instead of simply being told, here's what you need to do. You need to put in grab bars. You need to do this and down the checklist, right? Allow them to know that they have choices and that they are still in, because at the end of the day, they are still in control of it. Emphasize that to them and you're likely to get better buy-in on what you're actually trying to accomplish. Now, the one exception to this would be if you happen to have an older adult client that is simply overwhelmed and would prefer that you just tell them what they need to do, then by all means, do that. But that's, again, important to know, going back to that psychology aspect, where are they at? Do they want to be in control? Do they want you to just tell them? Okay. Another area important to meet older adults where they're at is when it comes to age tech or technology that can help them age in place. We know there are a wide range of products available. We can probably find you a tech option to help with a lot of different things that you might be struggling with when we're working with a client. These age tech options are only helpful if the older adult is willing and able to use them. Okay, sometimes they might actually just be a better benefit for a caregiver that's working with an older adult. Again, using my mom as an example, she has essential tremors. So that means suggesting anything for her that has like a touch screen is a horrible idea, because when she goes to use it, she will tap every single thing on the screen, or she won't be able to control. And then it ends up leaving her more frustrated and in honestly a worse situation than I was trying to solve in the first place. So be aware of those kinds of things if you're going to make recommendations. Technology is easier for some older adults than others. Some are very intuitive. For my mom, reluctant is putting it mildly. She would prefer not to have any of it. Find out what level of technology use they're comfortable with. Older adults are getting way more comfortable, and the pandemic helped spur that along a little bit out of necessity. Some of them are very comfortable with it. If they are, that's great. Going back to those theories of aging, age tech tends to involve two of the theories, the selective optimization with compensation and the motivational theory. If motivational theory is strong, they will likely be reluctant to any sort of age tech that allows others to monitor what they're doing because they will feel that it's a loss of control for them. Selective optimization with compensation, excuse me, that's a mouthful, can work either for or against the use of age tech. If an older adult views it as filling a compensation, they'll likely accept it because that's a compensation they don't have to make then. If they already optimize what they can do, they'll want to compensate in a way that doesn't involve relying on technology because they'll want to figure it out themselves. Understand where they're coming from so it can help guide recommendations that you're going to make for them. Okay, another perspective when it comes to technology use in older adults is the use it or lose it perspective, which can be taken two ways. Okay, the first view is to not use age tech until it's absolutely necessary to maintain their independence so that you have them rely on their own resources first to the greatest extent possible. A very basic example of this would be an electronic lift chair. Okay, if you're allowing the chair to do the standing for you, you're using your own muscles less, you get weaker, you need the chair more and more, your reliance is increased, and ultimately you end up increasing the problem that you were originally trying to solve. The other view is that learning new age tech is beneficial for cognitive health, right? One of the ways that we maintain our brain health is by learning new things. And age tech obviously presents the perfect opportunity in many cases to do this. Those possibilities with age tech are limitless and constantly growing and expanding. It's up to that individual to decide how much they're going to want to incorporate it into their lifestyle. And then you can work off of that. The National Aging in Place Council has 5 categories for aging in place that they look at: housing, health and wellness, personal finance, transportation, community, and social interaction. Okay, as CAPS, we focus on that first element, the housing. As a gerontologist, I'm looking at all 5, and whether I want to or not, it just kind of comes instinctively. Okay, so saving that housing category for last, which is what we focus on, we'll start with health and wellness. This correlates directly to one of those 3 pillars that I mentioned, because health is a critical barrier to why many people don't age in place. There are a number of misperceptions that certain health conditions prohibit you from being able to age in place. They're simply not true. One of the main health issues that's viewed this way is dementia. For those of you that attended the last webinar back in June, Ellen Belk spoke on ways that you can modify your homes for dementia to be able to facilitate aging in place. One of the courses I offer is also specifically focused on this very topic because it is growing as an issue for many people. While I was in graduate school, my research involved assisted living here in Nebraska, but part of it was focused on the availability of memory care. And while the numbers are growing, not just in Nebraska, but nationwide, there are not enough memory care facilities that are equipped to be able to deal with the number of people that are dealing with this particular health issue. And even if we built more facilities, the direct care workforce shortage is something we would still have to contend with, okay? Because you have to have enough people that are skilled working in those facilities in order to make it work. Beyond that, even the cost for these facilities, if any of you have looked into it or aware, it's substantially higher than, say, regular assisted living. And based on that information that I provided earlier, it's simply not going to be financially feasible for many. So for those with dementia and other health issues, even home health care has improved dramatically. Okay, although that workforce shortage is still going to impact here too at home. Statistically, actually a relatively small percentage of older adults need the caregiving services. Majority of caregiving actually is provided in the form of unpaid caregiving. But for those who do end up hiring caregivers to facilitate aging in place, the misperception here is with the cost. They usually grossly underestimate what caregiving will cost. It's getting up closer to around $30 an hour at this point. And so this is yet another reason that helping older adults maintain their independence is so vitally important, because it is expensive if you need help. Older adults are living longer in part due to the ability to manage chronic conditions through medication. Okay, if that medication is taken correctly, and that's an important part of this puzzle. Older adults have an alarming number of trips to the emergency room for adverse drug events. And in some instances, medications are even the contributing factor for a fall. For these reasons, managing medications safely is a large part of being able to safely age in place. Some of this can be as simple as making sure, like when you're doing a home assessment, is there an easy to read clock that's visible from where they spend their time? It's hard to take your medications on time and on the right schedule if you don't even know what time it is. Okay. There are various systems to help facilitate managing medications, from the very simple basic pill boxes to electronic systems that will dispense your medications. Again, got to go back to that age check and make sure they're willing to accommodate that. But adults ages 80 to 84 take an average of 18 prescriptions a year. And that doesn't include over-the-counter meds, that doesn't include supplements and vitamins and things like that. It's a lot. And many older adults end up relocating or not being able to age in place simply for help managing their medications because it becomes overwhelming. Regardless of the system that's selected, managing medications can't be overlooked when you're trying to help someone age in place. Okay. The second NAIPC category is personal finance. And while it might seem like this is a fairly specific category, it's actually fairly broad. It's not only going to include things, basic money management, like making sure bills are paid and managing insurance claims. It's also going to get into issues of things like financial elder abuse. All these things contribute to whether or not someone can age in place as well. Because if you can't take care of paying your bills, that's going to be a problem. Okay. When we're looking at the home environment and when it comes to personal finance, a basic thing to check is when you're looking at the exterior of the home, check for the access to the mailbox. Okay. In our neighborhood, mailboxes can be right by the front door. So in this house in my neighborhood, that yellow mailbox is right there. It's under a covered porch, so someone could easily get their mail. Our other option here is to have the mailbox at the end of the driveway, which is a little farther, but again, still manageable for most people. The United States Postal Service seems to be changing more toward the cluster mailbox hubs, which obviously is way more convenient for them. But if you're looking at a person aging in place, that complicates things. My mother-in-law lives in a community like that, and she drives to her mailbox, okay, because it is far enough away that that is a long walk. That relies on her being able to still drive just to get her mail. Okay. Part of helping older adults maintain their independence and being able to stay in their home is making sure that they can still do these very basic routine daily activities that we probably take for granted. If, for this specific example, if getting your mail is a problem and your support pillar is insufficient, then maybe they need to look at a money manager to help to make sure things don't get missed. Okay. Next category we're going into is transportation, community, and social interaction. Those are actually two, but I'm combining them because I think they're connected in what they're trying to accomplish here. A lot of times, aging in place home modifications are primarily focused on the home's interior. And that makes sense. It's where you spend the most of your time. But if we're trying to create an ideal situation for someone who's aging in place, we need to make sure we're not making it so that that we don't do such a good job of making the interior of the home that they never have to leave, right? Social interaction is important for all ages, and that doesn't change as we get older. This often involves being out in the community. So even for older adults that no longer drive, we still need to provide a safe way for them to leave their home. This following floor plan is for a forever home that is intended for aging in place, and it advertises at the very top stepless entry through the garage. Okay. I do often recommend to older adults that they focus on the entry they use the most often, partially because, again, if we're looking at limited finances or limited resources, yes, you need to focus on what gets used the most often and where the biggest priorities are. But if you are looking at a floor plan and you're looking at building a forever home, make both entries, or frankly, all entries, stepless. If you're starting from brand new construction, there really is not a reason that you would need to have that stoop with a step at the front door. Okay, make it visible as well. And we talk about these 0-step entrances, and they're important, but then take it one step further. Okay, we're an increasingly car-centric society, and here in Omaha, that's definitely the case. Our public transportation is not good at all. So look at, is there room to safely and easily enter and exit a vehicle? If you're looking at a standard double stall garage, it's good for about one car. If you're talking about having room to enter and exit, if you have ended up adding a ramp in there because you don't have a stepless entry, then you're definitely down to space for just one car. If you're looking at transportation that's being entered and exited on a driveway, make sure that you have room to enter and exit the vehicle safely onto solid ground, not onto the lawn. Okay, a lot of the times, and this is my neighbor's house, they added that extra strip on because when you open the car door, there's room for 2 cars on the driveway, but then when you step out, you're instantly on grass. And that's not a good situation either. Make it so that it is easy. You know, we're worried about falls in the home. Make sure they're not falling just trying to be able to leave their home, because again, they'll end up homebound because they'll be scared of not being able to safely leave their home. So now let's get into the housing category, okay, which is where CAPS, we kind of focus all of our attention, or at least most of it. CDC definition of aging in place is the ability to live in one's home and community, and I did talk about that, safely, independently, and comfortably, regardless of age, income, or ability level. Okay, CAPS are very good at focusing on the safely and independently part. Gerontologists really add in the comfortably part, and I will explain that in more detail here as we go through some specific topics with some specific examples. So one of the most commonly touted home modifications for aging in place is to remove rugs. The reasoning behind this, obviously, safety purposes, eliminate tripping hazards, reduce the possibility for falls, prevent all that kind of stuff. And I don't disagree with that at all. Okay. The gerontologist in me looks at it a little differently. I still likely want the rug removed, but when you remove a rug, you alter the acoustics of a room, okay? Especially if it's an area rug. A smaller rug like the one in the picture, not necessarily as much, but if you're taking out an area rug, the acoustics are going to change. It can make a room echoey. And the same is true. It's actually worse if you remove wall-to-wall carpeting. Hearing issues are ranked second only to mobility issues. So while you just help someone with their mobility issue by removing the rug and making the space safe, you increase their hearing issue by creating an acoustic problem. So in other words, going back to that CDC definition, you made the space more safe, which is good, but you made it less comfortable. Okay, homes are rarely designed with acoustics in mind. And I know this from my architecture background. It's just not a huge factor that typically goes into designing those spaces. For those with hearing issues, which is primarily going to be older adults, this can be a problem. Referencing back to those senior living facilities, many of them have very large dining rooms that have large, high ceilings. They are great to look at, but they are a nightmare acoustically. Okay, they were designed for what looks good, not for what sounds good. Reviewing the CAPS material that we have, there appears to be one brief page that addresses acoustics, and it basically acknowledges that it is a tough problem that is hard to solve. Okay, what I'm suggesting here is that if mobility is less of an issue of hearing than hearing, oh, I'm losing I have lost control of this. What happened here?
Looks okay.
It's frozen. Well, let's see.
Can you advance?
It's not letting me. I have no idea what just happened. Okay, let's try. Oh, goodness. Well, let me see. One second, and let me see if I can reshare this, and we'll get. No, oh shoot.
I think. Huh.
There we go.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, no idea what was going on there. I apologize for that delay.
Technology.
Okay. So if mobility, going back to the issue we were talking about, if mobility is less of an issue than hearing, removing the rug might not be the best option for you. Okay, a better option might be a low pile rug that's secured. Now, if the rug definitely needs to go for safety reasons, maybe the acoustics can be addressed by displaying a quilt on the wall. In last month's presentation, when Ellen Belk was showing that she had removed the bear rug from the floor to make it safer for her parents, which definitely was a great idea, I instantly thought, if the rug was important to them, that could be a wall hanging. They'd still be able to see it, but it's no longer a tripping hazard, right? Fabric drapes can help with stuff like that. In the bedroom, a large padded headboard might be a good solution for that because it will help absorb some of the noise. If the budget happens to allow it, there are even acoustic wall panels that are used as wall decor that are extremely attractive. Again, higher end, you need a higher budget to make it happen, but there are ways to address the acoustics of the space. This is one of those times where it's likely going to require some creativity, but it's worth it to help keep that space not only safe, but comfortable for them. Okay, another common recommendation for aging in place home modifications is adding light. Again, no disagreement with this general premise. In fact, I think this is one of the most important home modifications you can make to facilitate aging in place. The physical decline that is associated with aging does involve changes to our eyesight, okay? Lenses thicken and yellow, which causes some distortion of color recognition. slower reaction time to changes in light levels. No one is immune to these changes. Beyond that, there's a number of eye-related conditions that I'm sure you're familiar with, things like glaucoma, cataracts, macular degeneration, diabetic eye disease, the list goes on and on. They're all going to present their own unique challenges. The upside to this, if there is one, is that these changes tend to occur gradually, which goes back to the compensation theory, and we learn to compensate for them as we age. Home modifications, what those can do is make it so that less compensation is necessary. Additional lighting, typically LED, is one such modification. However, if you're going to increase light levels, do it the right way, okay, in order to get the maximum benefit from what you're trying to do. Much like acoustics, lighting design is given very little attention in home construction. With older adults like Warren Buffett that I mentioned earlier, living in homes that were built in the 1950s and 60s, what you're often looking at is rooms with a centrally located ceiling mounted fixture or an assortment of outlets that run from a wall switch. Without overhauling the electrical system of the house, it's hard to achieve good high quality lighting in these situations. Swapping out bulbs is the easiest way to increase light levels, but increasing the light level of fixtures where you can see the bulbs can be problematic, because an older adult is going to have to divert their eyes away from it due to that slower reaction time for their eyes to adjust to that increase in light. Okay, increasing light in a lamp with a shade that allows more light to penetrate it might be a better option. Be extremely sensitive when you add light that you're not increasing glare, which can also be a problem for older adults, and you don't want to create more problems than you're trying to solve, okay? Make sure the location of the lighting is appropriate is another best practice for this. Where are they doing activities that require more light? Again, in those older homes, in a bedroom, if you have a centrally located light fixture, it's probably over the middle or the end of the bed, which probably isn't where they actually need the light the most. Obvious solution is going to be to add lamps, but then again, make sure that you're not creating a tripping hazard, and make sure that those lamps are providing light at the right height. Even something as simple as recommending night lights is not as simple as it sounds. Some night lights don't put out enough light to be helpful for aging eyes. Others put out light in the wrong direction. One solution might be an LED outlet nightlight cover. Okay, it shines the light downward. So theoretically, the light is shining down where you're walking and not into your eyes and blinding you, which would be a great idea. They don't require special wiring to install, but I have found they don't work with all outlets. At least they didn't in my home. There were some where they didn't work, and they don't work with GFCI outlets. So they're probably not going to work in kitchens and bathrooms, but they can be another option. This is part of the reason why checklists for aging in place are not always super helpful for older adults. Simply telling them they need to add lighting without explaining how to do that isn't really going to solve their problem usually. Going back to the definition, it's going to help with safety and independence, but it's not necessarily going to make the space more comfortable unless it's done the right way. So while we're talking lighting, let's go ahead and touch on controls here too. We typically recommend rocker style switches. Take that one step further and make sure that the switch is visible and easy to locate. Be careful of giving a general recommendation just to add dimmer switches. Dimmers can be useful for controlling lighting levels, but I have really struggled to find one that's ideal for older adults. A lot of the rocker style switches that I've been able to find locally for older adults have a very hard to use dimmer switch. And I apologize for that bad picture, but I just wanted to be able to show the rocker switch is great, the dimmer feature is horribly hard to find, and it's going to be very difficult for an older adult to use. So if you have good recommendations of dimmer switches that you found, my contact information will be at the end of this. Please share them with me, because I would love to be able to have some good examples of that to share with older adults. Motion and occupancy sensors, again, can be helpful, but be careful with their use, because again, it takes those older eyes longer to adjust. And so if you're using them, say, in a bathroom at night, you don't want to be blinding people as they walk into the bathroom. That's going to create a dangerous situation. My go-to lighting resource is David K. Warfel. David's a lighting designer with Light Can Help You, but my favorite resource of his is the Don't Do This blog series on his Language of Light blog. Okay, he has room by room posts that provide generalized examples of spaces and shows what, as it says, what to do and what not to do as far as lighting is concerned. All right, for example, in his post about kitchen lighting, here's the illustration that he did. He shows that under cabinet lighting has a right and a wrong location. It's not just as simple as saying, add some under cabinet lights. There's a right place to put those if you actually want to get benefit from them. If you're going to recommend to clients that they increase their light levels, don't have them waste money doing it the wrong way. Okay, they'll just end up more frustrated because it still didn't really solve their problem, or even worse, it creates additional problems. But I encourage you to check out David's blog posts. They're not short, and he apologizes for that, but they are easy to read. They're well put together. And again, they'll take you through a house room by room and also the exterior to give basic information. Look at the, another instance where you shouldn't generalize your recommendations is with cabinet pulls. Cabinet pulls are great, okay? They are much better than knobs. Not all pulls are created equal. These pictures are from when I am in the process of redoing my kitchen. The picture on the left is the previous pulls that I had, which I thought were great. The new pulls on the right are infinitely better. Okay, they are way easier to use, and they have more space for my fingers, and the extended top and bottom mean that I can still just slide my hand behind and pull without having to navigate it through that center part. And I can still open my cabinets. I've also removed that extra trim piece that you see my fingertips hitting into in the first picture to make them even easier to use. Okay, these are standard 3-inch on center pulls, but maybe for some of your clients, a 5-inch on center pull is what's going to be needed to actually work. Take the time and be specific with those recommendations. Obviously, they can pick the style, they can pick the finish, but if you get more specific about what pulls will work best for them, they're likely to end up being happier with it, because technically the first one is a pull, but it was not nearly as easy to use as the new ones. Look at the furnishings in the home. The dinette set that my in-laws have has wheels on the chairs, and as the caps, I see it as an accident waiting to happen. It sort of terrifies me. Pay attention to things like the height of the furniture. Add risers if necessary to get furniture to the right height. Pay attention to the edges of furniture. Okay, rounded edges are forgiving, straight edges are not. And this becomes important because incorporating that biology of aging, our skin changes as we get older, okay? It becomes more fragile, if you will. So a rounded edge, if an older adult bumps into it, might cause a bruise, where a straight edge is going to cause a bruise and a laceration. That's an important distinction because as we age, our immunity also decreases. So every laceration is a possible entrance point for infection. So if you can keep them from, actually getting a laceration and they just end up with a bruise, hopefully you can keep them from having either, but things happen. Pay attention to the edges because those are important. Also, older adults are prone to using furniture for stability, even those that use mobility devices like walkers, canes, and stuff. For whatever reason, people can tend to be reluctant to use those in their own homes, and they'll end up using furniture instead. Ideally, they wouldn't do this, okay, but you're likely not going to be able to convince them to stop it, or at minimum, it's going to be a habit that they're going to need time to break. So simply anchoring furniture to the walls is probably a good solution for that. Organizing and decluttering are often mentioned in connection with home modifications. Clutter can present a safety issue, but again, be cautious about disrupting their mental maps of the space. You would be amazed at how much information they store about what is where, even if it doesn't look logical or make sense to you. At the very least, if this is going to happen, it's something that the homeowner or homeowners need to be actively involved in. And it connects to the issue of maintaining control, but it also connects to the fear of dementia. Forgetting where we put things is not a symptom of dementia, and it happens to all of us from time to time. But for older adults, these moments of forgetfulness bring on new concerns that there's something more going on, okay? Don't let this be another situation where that intended solution actually creates more problems for them. As a gerontologist, again, focusing on quality of life, not just safety, I want to look at ways to not only just keep them independent, but keep them doing the activities that they enjoy, right? How can they keep doing those things? If they enjoy gardening, maybe it's a matter of raised planter beds or getting things up to a higher level for them. This might mean that I need to focus more on the safety of the outdoor spaces, like the patios, or putting railings near the yard or things like that so that they can get to where they want to spend their time. If they enjoy reading, maybe I need to focus more on specific lighting for wherever they choose to do their reading. If they enjoy cooking, maybe we need to look at using a lighter set of pots and pans that allows them to continue safely doing that. Maybe they need an induction stovetop. Whatever the case may be, whatever those activities are, find out what it is they want to do and help them be able to continue doing those activities, okay? Yes, we want to be able to bathe safely. Yes, we want to be able to be in our own home and be safe, but we need to take it a step further than just being safe. They need to be able to still enjoy life and the things that they do to the greatest extent possible. For many, think of it this way, if bingo was super popular, older adults would not be so interested in aging in place, right? They'd be flocking to senior housing. It really is not the draw that people think it is. People have other interests, find out what they are. For many older adults, they also don't want to leave home because of a pet, okay? Pets can be that factor for wanting to age in place, so make it so that the home works for them to be able to care for their pets. Maybe that means adding a pet door so that they're not constantly having to get up and let their animal in and out. Maybe it means fencing in the yard if they can't take their dog for walks anymore. All of these little extra things I'm talking about here are not necessarily directly related to their physical safety, but it helps their mental health, which is actually directly connected to their physical well-being. Some people you'll hear use the phrase thriving in place instead of aging in place because they want to put a more positive spin on it. I think thriving maybe is overshooting or setting the expectations a little too high, but we do want to enable it so they can do more than just exist in their home. And so this brings us to grab bars. It's hard to find a LinkedIn or blog post about aging in place that doesn't recommend grab bars. And I'm not arguing the validity of that point. The NHP statistics show that adding grab bars is a leading home modification. So this message is being effectively communicated. Grab bars, however, have that psychological barrier that we need to pay attention or be extremely aware of. Grab bars connote an impression of frailty. And while older adults may well be aware of their physical limitations, they also don't want to be reminded of them. Bathroom modifications in general, as you can tell from this, tend to be the priority for aging in place modifications. And while it's emphasized from the safety standpoint, which again is extremely valid, there's something else going on here. The bathroom is where we're most likely to fall, but it's also the location in our house that we are least likely to want assistance. Okay. Maintaining our independence can actually be a bigger motivator than safety when it comes to the bathroom. Think back to that level of risk tolerance. Okay, you might think, I will risk falling in there. I don't want someone helping me. We know of ways that we can set up that bathroom to allow for caregiver assistance, but what older adults actually want is to avoid that situation in the first place. So as a gerontologist, I focus less on that safety aspect of the bathroom and more on that overall goal of maintaining independence and comfort. Because when it comes to the bathroom, maintaining independence is going to result in comfort. Grab bars is one of those items that my mom is resisting until she's older. I don't know what age she considers acceptable for grab bars, but I'm guessing that a fall that results in an injury will probably be the determining factor for that. I would like to avoid that, but forcing them, as I stated earlier, is not going to do me any good. Psychologically, if she isn't ready to use them, she's not going to use them even if I have them installed. Which brings me back to meeting people where they're at, okay? For a gerontological approach to aging in place, incorporate that psychological aspect of what is going on with the aging process. Don't just make recommendations to address the physical aspects. Apply a broader lens to the topic and what you're trying to accomplish for aging in place, and go ahead and think outside that box of the physical home. Again, there's a number of ways that you can reach out or contact me, and I encourage you to do so. I would love to connect with all of you. I guess let's check and see. It looks like we might have a few questions or comments. Maybe not. Okay.
They were ongoing that I handled for you. So.
Okay. I love Margie's comment about layers of light. Yes. And the cochlear implants. Yeah. Again, acoustics. I wish, again, having a background in architecture, I wish architects spent more time on some of those issues, like the acoustics and the lighting, that all seem to just sort of be thrown in at the last minute. Unfortunately, it just isn't really the case. So we do what we can.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you touched on so many different aspects of this. It was well done.
Right. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Any quick questions that we have for Patty, or you can reach out through her many means of contact and pose a question to her directly. LinkedIn, she posted this opportunity on her LinkedIn site yesterday, so that's certainly something you can reach out to her with.
Yep. And again, sorry for those technical difficulties. I'm not sure what happened there, but you know.
As you mentioned in your presentation, we have to deal with technical issues.
I didn't mean to demonstrate it, but you know.
Okay, well, if there's no other business to come before us, I thank everyone for coming. You'll get the link later on today and watch for upcoming programs. And Patty, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Patty. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. It was great information.